On this episode of a Soul's Quest podcast, Omar and I will discuss why many are calling the Qatar World Cup the most controversial ever and what we can learn from this. Stay tuned.
Ole, 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 ole.
Oh,
Ole.
that's a great start.
You like that? You like
Yeah.
that? That's what to start this
We're
one.
talking about, this episode is talking about the World Cup. So, yeah.
Okay.
Well, this should be interesting.
Yeah,
Now,
this is a little fun.
full disclosure,
Uh-huh.
I'm not as versed on the World Cup. So I've been learning a little bit more about it. And I know that you've been a fan for as long as we've been together. So it's a long ass time, too, because it's been 21 years. So
Yeah, I'm a Barca
and-
fan. I love,
yeah. So
cool
I know you have your perspectives on
Yes.
the different teams and things like that. I'm not as versed in that regard.
No.
so.
I know. But it's
So-
okay. We're going to talk about World Cup today.
So the reason
Let the healing begin.
that the Qatar World Cup is so controversial this time is for a few, some very like glaring, obvious reasons, and
Yep.
some that people may not really know about.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people who are not soccer fans,
Yeah.
so they're not gonna know what we're talking about.
And you know, I think also that's like the source of the problem too.
That people don't know anything.
A lot of
about it?
people are not really football fans,
Football fans, yes,
soccer in the States.
soccer.
Right, and you know, so there's a history in the World Cup, you know, just like there's like in the Olympics,
So the,
and a lot of the conversations that you hear about are kind of like based on a lot of geopolitical stuff, more and ideologies more than anything else. But let's get into it.
Okay.
Let's get into
okay,
it. Though. Let's
so
get into it.
the top three things that are the most controversial things, or the overarching themes are the corruption of the World Cup, and we'll talk more about that. But the corruption that's involved in soccer or football.
Yep.
Human rights violations.
Correct.
And then the cultural issues like banning same-sex relationships.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's what I kind of want to get into.
So let's give some context, right?
Yeah.
So I think back in 2014, both Russia, who's another one of those geopolitical issues that we have, and Qatar were awarded World Cups.
they were both awarded?
Yeah. So for the 2018,
It's 2014.
Russia
Okay.
was awarded the World Cup, first time ever
Okay.
in Russian soil, and then this time around for 2022, it was awarded to Qatar.
And when you say awarded, what does that mean?
That means that there's a selection committee in FIFA who is about governing body for soccer worldwide, and they select who or where the World Cup is going to be played. You know, so you know you have delegates from different federations. Like I showed you, there's like different federations throughout the world, right? And they have a certain, you know, there's UEFA, who's the most popular one. And that's the European League. There's the CONCACAF, which is South America. That's another one of the big ones. But then you also have CONCACAF. Actually, is the Central America and North America and the Caribbean. And then you also have the Asia, the Africans. So you have all those different confederations, and they all vote in deciding where the World Cup is going to go. Exactly.
So when you say awarded the World Cup, they're making the decision on where the games will be hosted.
Yeah, the executive body of FIFA, who is comprised of all these different people from all these different confederations, the executive committee, they decide where the World Cup is going to be held. And then this is what kind of like a segue into the corruption part, because this is kind of like when it gets a little, okay, did Qatar buy the World Cup? And so forth and so on. So let's get into that.
So yeah, let's kind of just kind of one by one we can go through the different controversies and sort of address each of those. So the first one is the corruption.
Correct.
So start with some of that.
So you and I watched this documentary on Netflix right now, right? It's called FIFA Uncovered, right? In which
on Netflix.
On Netflix, yeah. In which we don't have no affiliate deal.
Oh
with
darn!
Netflix.
Sorry. Okay.
We're just promoting the documentary.
No, it was a good documentary.
Right? And the idea behind it is that it kind of like goes behind the history of FIFA and the different things that and corruption that has taken place, and there's no denying that there is some quid pro quo taking place in that organization, and that's the things that I think that when you watch that documentary, it actually comes to light, and you start saying, there's a lot of power play, and there's a lot of different things in which that happens. So, but when you talk about corruption, really, right? I defied anybody to tell me of a group, either a government, an institution, or anything of the matter in which some level of corruption, some level of quid pro quo doesn't take place.
Right.
I mean, again, it's like, and fair enough, we want to strive to make situations all fair, right? And institutions to work properly and fairly with everybody. Okay. But this corruption, this allegation of Qatar buying the World Cup,
and that's not the first time that allegation has come about.
No, it's not the first time. And there's been many controversies about different executives taking money from different places, bribing other people so they could actually win their vote. So
this isn't necessarily what makes this the most controversial World Cup. It's the culmination of all these things. But the corruption...
Again, it's like, and this is what we're going to dive into. Okay. Because, again, the corruption of having places... of going to places, for instance, right? Well, I think one of the World Cups that was held in Argentina, I think the first one that was held in Argentina was under a brutal dictator. It was under a brutal dictator that killed a lot of people. Hitler and the Nazis held the Olympics. So you have... we don't want to talk about all this stuff, but it's like a lot of organizations had all these different things. And, they said the same thing about Africa. How did Africa get the World Cup? There was a lot of criticism as to whether Africa was capable of doing this. South Africa was capable of doing this. Did they have enough money? Who paid them? And there's in the documentaries, there's like some questioning as to who paid who in order for South Africa to get the World Cup. Yeah. So controversy in FIFA and controversy in organizations of that stature when it comes to quid pro quo and exchange of money, it's not unheard of. There's another documentary out there just to kind of like put like a symbol like a comparison to it. Okay. Right? It's called Trade the Swamp. It's on HBO. Right, and one of the things that struck out of me, it's like they're going through the elections of new the House of Representatives members, to go, but after they get elected, which they raise money to get elected, they gotta raise money to make things happen in Washington. If not, they won't get into the certain committees and they won't get into things like that. Now, it sounds kind of similar, right? Yeah, it's like so we have to be careful as to when we call out people, because we have to kind of like look at our own system. I remember I was just in a meeting 2 weeks ago with a person who used to work in Washington, and she said the same thing. And she used to work in she says, yep, everything has to do with money. Yeah. So when we're looking at things like that about the role of money and how it plays in these big international and political arenas, we got to be careful before we throw stones. Right. Okay. I want to kind of like give some things like to keep in mind, right? Because I think that being that this is the World Cup, right?
Well, first it begs the question before you go into this: did Qatar buy the World Cup?
Again, I wouldn't.
And now, no, I'm saying that's the question.
Yeah.
And now, if you go through these details that you're about to share with us.
I can't deny it. I mean, based on what we saw in that documentary, there was some money exchange for voting.
There was some stuff going on.
But I don't doubt that that's happening in any other ones.
So I was just going to say, is it just specific to Qatar?
I think, and this is me speculating, I think there's a bigger lens because of our geopolitical relations with the Middle East.
Okay.
Right? I mean, there's a little bit of that in there. And I think anybody that says otherwise, it's kind of like, come on, it's not right. Because they said a lot of the same things about Africa. How did Africa get the World Cup? They don't have the resources. South Africa. They don't have the resources. They don't have this. How did they buy the World Cup?
Right.
So like, and we're gonna get more into this because there's a little hint of an us against them mentality, particularly because it's Qatar, and which is an area in which we're now very fond of, and we have to be honest about that little that's there, right?
I like how you did that.
It is because the U.S. we weren't happy when Qatar had it. I mean, you could see it in even Sepp Blatter, who was the president of FIFA.
Even said it.
They implied he wasn't happy about Qatar getting the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
But since it's really a World Cup, and soccer by far is the world's number one sport.
Right.
It's by
world.
It's the world's number one sport.
That's the operative word.
It is truly this is the only game that is played almost in every single part of the world. So this is really a World Cup.
So break that down, because you have it written down here. I was trying to get you to do that earlier.
Okay.
So you said that there were 10 World Cups held in Europe.
Well, yeah, I'm going to get into that. So in total,
sorry.
No, that's fine. There's been, and again, it's like when you start looking at numbers and you really start kind of like seeing like all these different things. Sorry, I'm kind of like fidgeting.
I see that.
Right. When you start really looking at things, I kind of like put out some numbers, and I wanted to say, okay, how many World Cups are there? How many countries are in the world, and who's get where, right?
And then truly, this is a World Cup.
And truly, it's a World Cup because it is a world sport, And granted, it's a sport that's started in England. It's a sport but it's been accepted all throughout the world, right? So keep in mind there have been 21 World Cups, right?
And this is played every 4 years.
Every 4 years, right?
Got it.
10 of them, which is almost half, have all been held in Europe. Some countries having it twice. Okay? 5 in South America.
Right.
And South America is one of the biggest exporters of soccer players throughout the world. Right. But only 5 have been in South America. 3 have been held in North America.
Right.
Right? 2 in Asia. And that includes 1 in Russia and 1 in Japan. 1 in Africa. 1 in Africa. And Qatar is the first World Cup ever that has been held in the Middle East. Now, when you start thinking about those things, right? If we're talking about equity and all that stuff, right? Like, where's the balance?
That's what I was.
It's because it's clearly leaning towards the West.
Yeah.
Even and I don't mean it's leaning primarily mainly towards Europe.
Right.
But because even here in North America, considering that we had it in North America only 3 times, and then the next one is going to be in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. That's 4 times. And think about South America. Think about places in South America. I mean, you could, and the argument is always, they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have their stadiums are horrible.
Well, they even questioned that in Qatar, that they didn't have the infrastructure.
They questioned that in Brazil.
Oh yeah.
It's like, the stadiums are crappy and this and that and the other. So like when you start looking at the argument, it's like, okay, let's listen, and let's kind of like let's look at things like, okay, let's look at what's on the table for what it is on the table, because there is, we talk about unconscious bias, right? Unconscious bias is like a thing in arguments and in individuals that we have. Maybe there is some unconscious bias that in these arguments and criticism that Qatar is facing right now. And I'm not a Muslim. I don't, it's not my culture, but I'm trying to be kind of, for this sake of this episode, I'm just trying to be objective to kind of like look at this thing. It is the very first World Cup held in the Middle East, right? For a group of people that in the last 20 years have done amazing architectural stuff in a desert. Right? Yeah. They were able, literally, they were able to construct 4 amazing stadiums, right? In a matter of years, right? It's an accomplishment of human potential, right? but we're gonna get into the things that are excuse me, legitimate criticisms on how they got there. And so we're going to get into that. I think that's the segue to the next one.
It is. So then we're talking about the people.
Yeah.
How the people that built these stadiums. What are the human rights violations, which was one of the things that we were.
So according to some estimates, right, there's been up close to maybe 4,000 to 6,000 Nepalese and other people, minorities coming in working primarily from the east, from India, from the Nepal and that area, that have perished and died building these things, right? Now this is a serious matter. You know, it's nothing that I think that it is a legitimate gripe.
Yeah.
To be able to bring up, because you need to have like better working conditions. You know, you need to make sure that they're safe, their people are protected. You know, and you know, Qatar says, yeah, you know, we're doing stuff like that, and we're trying to we're improving situations and all that stuff. And I think that in when a country's expanding so fast, you know, and they want to keep up with everything else, it has a tendency to cut corners.
Yeah,
right.
Which is what I think Qatar did, because they did so much in so many. Yeah. I mean, recent years.
Exactly,
right?
And it's important to bring it up, right? And this is one of the things that is like, the people look at our history, at American history, right? And I forgot the exact name of the situation, but do you remember the textile fire that took place in New York, in that building, that a lot of people died, and that was the catalyst for us to
like
making
a long time.
It is. I think it was either in the
18?
No, it was
19.
It was in the early 1900s, 1920s, around that time, right?
No, but I remember.
And that changed a lot of laws when it came to taking care of stuff.
Emergency exits,
you know, and so I think that that criticism and bringing it up, hey, listen, you guys need to do a better job at the process of taking care of the workers, even though they're migrants, you know. But we have a history of the same, you know. England has a history of child abuse, you know, working in the coal mines and working in and all that stuff. So it's like, when you have that pressure to progress and stuff, you know, you have the tendency to cut corners, and this is something that is a legitimate thing that for people to gripe about, and for people to kind of like say, you know, you need to do better with that. We need to kind of like fix that. And that's something that I think is legitimate. They said that they have made some changes about it. You know, time will tell. But we do have to kind of like bring that up, because I think that is a fair process. However, again, when you look at a country that has to grow so quickly, yes, they cut corners. We have cut corners, you know.
What do you mean we?
As a Western society, we have used slaves. We have used, you know, even to this day, we use migrant workers to and they're not integrated into our society, but they do a lot of the remedial jobs that none of our kids want to do.
Right.
You know, so there's a lot of that too. You know, so like when we're throwing stones, it's like we have to kind of like say, okay, well, we have to be able to do our part too, in our part of this world.
I wonder that if you take that perspective and you start to say, you know, okay, we've been there, we've done this too. We cut corners. We're not innocent. Yeah. Rather than pointing the finger and saying, "Oh, you're so terrible. That's awful." Whatever. Instead, show support for those changes. And what can we do as a civilized, as a nation in the Western Hemisphere, right?
To integrate,
to help and incorporate some of the things that we have learned, rather than just judging and throwing. Yeah, stones.
Because it's so easy to criticize.
And it's probably easy for us to say, well, we should integrate and we should do this and that, whatever. Because I know there are going to be a lot of political views on that, and people are going to be like, no, and ego and all this stuff. But it's a perspective. It's something to think about in terms of how we can become more of a cohesive humanity. Yes, just to be together. Yeah, and it's the thing that we talk about on ASQ is humankind and being kind, and a little bit of kindness goes a long fucking way, and so those are things that are important and relevant.
Respectful of life, right? Yeah. and like respectful of life, because as Qatar wants to grow, it also needs to learn to be able to respect other people and not just look at it as just labor, disposable labor. Right. You know, I mean, and again, it's like our history shows that we have made that mistake in the past, and we have rectified a lot of that, and we'll continue to improve. And I think them being a young nation, of coming into wealth so rapidly within the last 50 years,
they're new money.
They're new, yeah. You know, it's like this is something that the approach needs to be different instead of condemning. Right. You know, it's like, and that's kind of like my take when it comes to that. Okay. You know.
All right, good. So then what about the cultural issues? I know we talked about the same sex and homosexuality and things like that. Let's talk about that, because that's actually really interesting to me.
Yeah, this is the part that is challenging for a lot of people. You know, most people don't know that, you know, the Middle East, they live by Muslim. Most of the countries live under some kind of a Muslim law, right? And it's a different perspective than ours. A lot of the times we find perspectives like that to be conflicting with our values. Naturally so, right? Because everybody has different values and different ideas. And the issue that we're seeing is that their values are contradicting what's popular right now, what the movement is right now, which we as individuals in our countries are still struggling with, as figuring out, okay, how do this all fit in? So there is conflict within our own world as to how do this all fit into the scope of our modern society. Now, here's a culture that is a little bit that's more traditional in their ways. Their freedoms are not the same as ours, you know. And then you have regulations, you know, in which same-sex relationships are not allowed. That's hard for a lot of people to accept, that there are cultures that are different than ours. And it's a hard topic to swallow, but at the same token, and this is the thing that I feel that the approach, I think, is the issue. In my opinion, I think it's the approach of condemning, of finger pointing and saying this, instead of leading by example. You know what I mean? Instead of leading from a place of understanding and acceptance and love, and then hopefully by those approaches, people could change as well. Because what is the next option, right? Because this is the World Cup. Are we going to isolate people in which we don't share the same values or the same view of life? We're going to, like a friend of ours said, we're going to send them to Wyoming, right? In a concentration camp, or isolate them from participating in the world, you know, because.
Well, I think that's where we're heading.
Yeah.
In the things that we say and in our actions.
But and the thing is that it's not only happening, it's happening within our places, within us.
But that's what I'm trying to say. And so when you say that we have to lead by example, so we're driving that message to our own society, our own civilization here in America, right? Because this is where we reside. And our behaviors don't always exude that togetherness,
correct,
and forgiveness and understanding and accepting of, okay, you're a dude and you like dudes. You're a female and you like females, and you don't eat. You're vegan, or you're whatever. I sleep around.
I think, again, it's like we talked about ideas.
I don't sleep around. I'm saying
no. Yeah. I understand.
Sorry.
We talk about ideas, right? We talked about ideas in the previous episodes and about how we hold on strongly to ideas. And a lot of the times, what we do is that we force our ideas into somebody else. Now, the world, in the way our perspective when it comes to the way, and this is what was always going to be a conflict, and it's always going to be that ideological and value-based concept and conflict between opposite points of views: socialism, capitalism, right? Conservatism, liberalism, right? The West, the East, right? Christianity, Muslim. It's like you got the polarized points of views, right? And when you have those two polarizing points of views, the main idea that we have is finger pointing.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, they don't do this, and so they're bad. And they do this, and so they're bad. Yeah. And then what we're suggesting, what we're talking about is like, there's a different perspective, right? That we need to also
be open to.
It is without condoning or condemning.
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
Objective.
Like I say, okay, we understand that those are your values, and we understand that that's how you choose to live. These are the parameters in which we need to participate and do that. You know, and can you meet those parameters, right? And for the most part, they're civilized people. They're civilized. They have their way of looking at the world and their perspective, and they choose to live their lives.
But understanding that you have boundaries,
correct?
And respect those boundaries.
Yes. And it's like, and then as time progresses, either their culture will align more with ours, or it will not. Now, can we still coexist? Mm-hmm. In that, it is the question, you know, because a lot of the conflicts that we always have, like you look at history, our conflicts nowadays, you know, it have nothing to do with like protecting territory or this and that and the other, or even the natural resources. Our conflicts are more ideological conflicts, you know, since the end of World War II till now, it's all ideological conflicts that we're having, you know. We have the socialist versus the capitalist conflict. Which one is better? Which one is worse? You know, God forbid in America you call someone socialist. You know, and or you know, it's so again extremes and perceptions and ideas that take away from their humanity or what's going to happen.
They dominate our existence.
They dominate what we are. And it's like, and this is like
and I think it takes away from our individuality as well.
But this is the thing. You're
buying into this belief or this process of thinking that is so judgmental and so subjective in my opinion, right?
But it takes away from, we're talking about the World Cup right now, right? It takes away from the effort that all these players are putting into.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, it takes away from
the black cloud.
Yeah, it takes away from the effort that you have some African countries who are have developed and have grown and have benefited from what FIFA has done. The United States moved into the second round. You know? Yeah. And that's a benefit of what FIFA has done. You know, and soccer has become more popular in the States because of what FIFA has done and the exponential growth of a sport that is not from here. Right. You know, we're football, you know, a football nation, you know, and I mean traditional American football, you know, and we're not a soccer nation. But look at the transformation that sport, has done within the States, but we see this all the time, and you could see, you know, I saw the same thing when Africa was hosting the World Cup. There was just these little things as, you know, they can't pull this off. Even in Brazil, I was hearing the same thing. Even in Brazil, like, oh, the stadiums are not up to par, and this and that and the other. You know, only Europe and the States have the best. You know, but you have to give.
And those were all good World Cups.
You know, you have to give people, you know, all the other people, countries in Africa, you know, countries in the Middle East that have never had the spotlight, spotlight put on them.
Right. Allow them an opportunity.
Have an opportunity to do that, and if they're able to come up with it, you know, let them give it a shot.
Right. That's like, it's kind of like compared to, like, you know, you have a friend, you go to that friend's house and they're not as tidy and clean as you are, and dishes everywhere, and, you know, who knows, they got this or that or whatever. Like, is that like you don't want to be friends with that person? Probably a great person, but you just don't want to be friends with that person because they don't live the way that you live.
Exactly.
And the way that you live is okay, based as opposed to how they live.
Exactly.
And so they don't value the individual.
Yeah.
They value
the perception of it all. It's like, it really boils down to this. either you're like me or you're not.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the midst of that, like we always set the narrative of always having an enemy and always having an other, right? And we take away from the fact that to have stadiums in a desert that are functional, that are beautiful, that is a feat of human ingenuity, right? Like that, like, oh my God, they did it? Oh, wow. It's like, also humans could do that? You know? And it's like, well, the World Cup is typically held in the summer. Well, they moved that up to a little bit later, so it's a lot cooler. Yeah. It's like, oh, we could do that? It's like, this is how you solve problems, and this is how you improve relations, you know, and you get better. And you improve, and you participate, and if you feel that, you know what, I appreciate it, I have done that, but because of my idea, I choose not to participate on this particular one, that we should be okay with that. Right. You know, and allow them the opportunity to be a part of a global community as well. Yeah. You know, because again, it's like we're still, and I don't know why I always go back to the line. We're just floating. Yeah. We're just floating in a rock in the middle of nowhere.
Think what happens is that brings you down to that level of vulnerability that a lot of people are not necessarily exposed to because they're so confident in where they're at in their life
and their belief system
They everything is solid in that.
Exactly.
But the truth is that we're not. I mean, we could get hit by a meteor and the whole place could turn into like.
I said, and what was it all for? I much rather like, and I've been watching all the games, and it's like, you know, watching Japan, you know, beat Germany, watching Germany type Spain, and then France, and I think France is going to take it because those guys are unbelievable, and just watching the games, you know, and watching people in the stands doing the wave, and people getting along, and just enjoying. Kind of like the sport and seeing the spectrum of humanity, all the different colors, all the diversity that there is of us, the happiness of the Ghana coming in with the drums and dancing and all that stuff. You know, the precision and beauty that Germany plays with. You know, I was watching Germany and Spain, right? And I'm a big Barcelona fan. I love the philosophy of Barca and how they play. And just seeing how Spain, it is so brave, to play so far back, enticing Germany to come forward so they could attack. That is just like, that's why they call it a beautiful game. It's like, are you watching it for that? Or are you watching it because you want to imprint your idealism into the beautiful game? And it's like, you know, I know Mexico lost to Argentina, but Argentina has Messi. So sorry, I'm rooting for Messi.
But that was a really good game.
But Mexico was brave. You know, okay, fine, they weren't excellent, but just seeing the courage and like these guys giving it their all and just representing their countries and doing the best. Iran, you know, it's like, and the U.S. playing a game. I miss all this stuff, and it was an amicable game. You know. Yeah. It's like when you're seeing things like that, you can see that yes, we could always criticize, but look at the beauty that comes from from that idea, from seeing all these different cultures and stuff coming together, competing in a way that brings joy to people, that brings joy to over. I think like the. I forgot what the numbers were. It's like 10 million people or something like that watched the Super Bowl, but it's like 110 million people watch the World Cup. It's probably larger, but the disparity between the two and seeing all these different guys playing from different countries and still shake hands afterwards. I mean, come on. It's like we are progressing. We are getting better as humanity. Yeah. You know, we are getting better.
Slowly.
Yeah, but we still have the need to criticize.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Okay. So we need to recap.
Yes, we do.
I know I could see you were getting very passionate there, but we do have to come down now to the final moments of this episode. But to end it, I'm going to share a quote, and this is by Alan Watts from The Spectrum of Love. Okay. Some of you here feel that you belong to a nice set of people. It may be an ordinary kind of bourgeois coterie of pleasant squares, challenging me.
Yeah.
Or it may be a church group of some kind, a club or a special cult, or just a group of friendly drinkers. But at any rate, you feel that by virtue of membership in this society, you belong to a special in-group of nice or saved people. Now, when you consider what nice people talk about when they sit around the dinner table and have an opportunity to nurture their collective ego, you will find that the most fascinating topic of conversation is the nasty people.
Mm-hmm.
How awful they are, what dreadful things they do, and what it is all coming to. Mm-hmm. I read this earlier and thought it was funny. And this very, very satisfactory, condemnatory conversation nurtures your ego. But people who do that don't seem to realize that they thereby depend on the nasty people in order to know that they're nice. They are, as a matter of fact, highly indebted to them. Mm-hmm. So I know I messed up and inserted some things. So I know that you can put that out there for people to read because it's actually very powerful. When I read it earlier, I was like, holy shit, this is for real. This is it right here. Like this summarizes, it's almost like it's the undercurrent of what is actually happening with the whole corruption and this whole thing with whatever. So
like we got to get off our high horses.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like we really do. I mean, it's important that we make strides to make society better and to make people feel inclusive. Right. But we can't do it from a high horse.
No.
To
think that we're better.
Think that we're better than. Yeah. To think that we're right and they are wrong. Because again, the separation.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. It's an immediate their mentality.
Yes.
And so
us
that
versus
leads
them.
That leads me into the 4 things that we can, or that we need to learn individually and collectively, right? That we need to use. And it's very much an us-them mentality. So that's the undercurrent of what's happening here with the FIFA World Cup, right? So there's 4 things. Number 1 is to accept others' cultures and perspectives. The question here that we can ask ourselves is what would the world be like if we were all the same?
It'd be kind of like a boring place, right?
Yeah, totally boring. I mean, one of the things that I really appreciate is when we can go to other cultures and experience that culture. I remember like when we went to, even cultures here in the United States. When we went to Vegas, that's a completely different way of living. California, Seattle, Washington, all these places.
Even with the Hispanic culture,
Canada.
know, it's like the Mexican culture is a lot different than the Caribbean culture.
Yes.
You know, the South American, Central America culture is different. You know, the South American culture is so much different. Argentina, Uruguay, they're much different than the northern in Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador. Yeah. So you have those differences, but it's like the beauty of it all is that you could experience those different things and then see the similarities. Right. Between all of them, you know,
there's more
beautiful.
Similarities than there are differences.
Yes,
in my opinion,
exactly.
Because I think even when it's something that's different, and you're just like, oh, that's different. The similarity is that it's pleasant, or that you experienced it together.
That is like,
and that it was like, wow, that's interesting. Oh, I would have never thought that you could make a taco this way or whatever.
Or you could say, oh man, this reminds me of what my grandma used to do.
Yeah.
So it's like, you see, it's
we're
like,
very similar.
It's like there's a lot more similarities. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Number 2. Live by our examples, which is the only way to influence others.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, it's like instead of trying to imposing other people, you fight for what you believe. And you know, I think we all need to be living in a world in which you could live the way that you want to without violating the rights of others. That's always be like a tenet of that. But you need to live by that example to be able to live from that point of view and then influence others by the way that you live your life instead of imposing your belief system on other people.
And so that's number 3. Stop trying to impose your values and beliefs on other people.
Correct.
Imposing those beliefs on other people.
Like fight for your values and you say, you know what? This is what my group, we want the freedom not to be harassed. We want the freedom not to be this. And we wish that on everybody else. Right. And we don't want to impose our values. We just want to make sure that we
are respected for these beliefs and what we want. Yeah.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Which makes sense. So, and then number 4, celebrate others' accomplishments. So basically what you're saying here is what Qatar has done in such a short period of time, like building the stadiums and all the stuff that they've come to in the last couple of years, is a great human accomplishment. Not perfect, but has any of our human accomplishments been perfect? So that's a good question.
I mean, like if you think about it, it's like we've evolved And we always are evolving.
Well, and you learn from your mistakes.
Exactly.
Too. You have to do something, and then kind of like hindsight is 20/20. Okay, we could have done this differently, and
Yes.
shit, we should have done this or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and I think those are all important things, and that's what makes us a thriving world.
Yes.
Because we're talking about the world. It develops us. It makes us better people. We become more creative. Makes us think outside the box. It's just all the very simplistic things that really bring us together. It's that community. You know what I mean? And I think when we respect each other, that you broaden that sort of. You take the blinders off, and you become a more, I don't know, rational and reasonable person. In my opinion, I think that you're easier to contend with when you have these perspectives of acceptance, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And I could see somebody say, well, that's a very naive notion of what you guys are talking about.
I know that.
But I will challenge them and ask them this question. What is the alternative? Mutual destruction?
Yeah. Well, some people would lean that way.
I know.
Especially when it comes to their beliefs.
I know.
So.
But again, accepting others and respecting
and having boundaries
or mutual destruction.
Yeah.
Which one would you prefer?
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Comment below with your thoughts and remember to stay connected by sharing and subscribing.